have been raised by a board member around some funding.
We're all good. Hello. Oh, look. I know. Sorry, Leanne.
No, don't apologise. You've got a cutie with you.
Oh, I know the replacement for the gym. You just need to try and put in a childcare car seat. Right. Don't need to go to the gym ever again.
Future councillor, what's yeah, but what's Asha.
Yeah, lost 12 lost 5 of this road.
Councillor Asha. Oh, have we? Yeah. I've got 2 boxes in the council chamber. There's some up here. Good. All right. Well, why don't we quickly do the other 2 reports, and we'll deal with them. So can you flip down to the next 2 reports, because they're 2 together. So Tim moves and Phil seconds. And now, would you like to raise the issues in those 2 reports that you wanted to touch on?
So the issue in the report of 7th of July, on page 63, Melanie Coker brought the notice of motion in 3 parts about some of the land that potentially for disposal in the ward. And I particularly want to highlight 90 Poonhay Road, which is the old Poonhay Voluntary Library, which there is considerable demand for, there's been some preliminary talks with community groups done by Melanie, and we're still waiting to hear back from staff, and we really are keen to make sure that that isn't lost for community use. And various things rumours floating around about what might be the intention for that land, but we don't have anything concrete, and it has been some time since we've heard, and we know that it will be used. And in that same report, the board requested that staff provide, so this is on page 64, 10.1, board requires that staff provide advice on council policy regarding funding organisations that accept tobacco industry sponsorship. And this is because we have learned, Helene Meltner has learned for us that Keep New Zealand Beautiful, which is the parent organisation for Keep Christchurch Beautiful, receives 97% of its funding from a combination of Coca-Cola and British American Tobacco. Half of that funding, $160,000 last year, came from British American Tobacco. And this concerns the board greatly. And so we would like to know if there is a council policy regarding us funding organisations that accept tobacco industry sponsorship. And on the final report, just wanted to highlight ongoing concerns around the Rowley Resource Centre, which is a key local project, and their new building, which has been funded by Council and Community Board, and needing assistance through the resource consent process. And finally, another appearance on page 66 of the Cass Street Waste Depot. I hope that the whole council shares our concerns about the jeopardisation of the Sydenham Master Plan, and understands that the whole Sydenham business community is vehemently opposed to the disposal facility to be run by Enviro Waste, which has been granted consent by Environment Canterbury, and traffic and noise consent from the council, or signage consent, sorry. I don't think there's anything else that needs raising.
Okay, so I'll put that motion. Sorry, I'm just Googling online. They're talking about corporate social responsibility goals and resources in their sponsorship, so I'll have to look it up. I'm just going to put the motion. On that? All right.
I know we've talked about ethical investment previously as a council, but you've just highlighted tobacco, but was there any other concern about other sorts of sponsorship?
Well, just Coca-Cola, which is the other 47% of their corporate funding.
Okay, so I just wonder whether in terms of you notice the motion, you're actually asking for something a bit wider than just tobacco, which is kind of like an ethical...
Well, no,
funding.
we are specifically about tobacco. The council wants to inquire further than that, that's up to the council, but that was the board's main concern.
Right,
Yeah.
but the reason for the tobacco is what?
Oh,
Well,
I think it's
well,
pretty obvious.
tobacco companies around the world fund these kinds of green programs and, you know, as their social responsibility for cleaning up the litter. But we know that, I mean, my view is that's just PR. I don't think I need to convince the council about the perils of tobacco.
No, you
So
don't.
it's the harm caused by the substance is the policy.
We've had smoke-free environments legislation since 1989. I don't think we need to pursue that further. Phil?
I just wanted to go back to the first one, and ask Carolyn really too, around the accessible parking. Just
No.
No?
We're not.
Which one are you doing?
We're doing
We're doing the
final
other
bit.
two reports, just
Okay.
clearing them away, and then we'll go back
Fine.
to the
We'll come back
to the part A. Yeah.
I don't know if you want comments or debate on this, whether we're just requesting council policy. But
No,
it's
no.
really a question is, by receiving
Hang on, the
sponsorship-
community board
Yeah.
raised an issue. They're getting feedback from staff
And that's all
on
you
it,
want, okay.
and I'm personally very interested in whether Keep New Zealand Beautiful does get sponsored by
Well, they do.
by these
It's a question of are you
organisations,
supporting
and we can pursue that separately, because I presume that we have a bit to do with that. So. All right, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And now we'll move back to the 19th of June report.
The first notice of motion, which addresses the idea of that when all development proposals are put forward, that just like legal consideration is a box that has to be checked and commented on, that we should include in those considerations cultural and other issues and disability access and other issues whenever we consider a developmental proposal. The reason for that is that I have twice moved two resolutions to this council, one 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, one a year ago, that was endorsed by the council here unanimously, both of them, and they have been lost in the system. And that was that the council doesn't partner, promote or invest in organisations that are housed in buildings that are not accessible for disability, people with disability. And that's been endorsed by this council once and by the previous council once, and is just completely gone in the system. But as well as that, when we were considering the Buchan Park issue, and we considered it seriously, and all the board members went to meetings at the park, when we considered that issue, and it was before our board, the fact that the Sydenham School, the historic Sydenham School, had donated artefacts to Buchan Park was not in the report, and we were not aware of it when we discussed the future of Buchan Park. The staff had that knowledge, and it was going to be presented at a later report. But when we were to decide on the future of Buchan Park, we didn't know about the artefacts. Phil would have done, the rest of us didn't. And that's a very serious thing, that we're considering development issues without talking about disability access and cultural history and artefacts. And I think they should be boxes when we consider development issues for the staff to comment on. The second thing is that Helene and I did a survey of the accessible car parks in our ward, which would have been humorous if it wasn't so serious, because there was hardly a park in our ward which complied with anything. The only parks that complied, and were very good parks, were the accessible car parks outside New World in St Martin's. The rest of the accessible car parks, almost to the last one, were not accessible, or were in the wrong place, or were badly marked, or one car park that was accessible was in front of a curb, and the next door marked car park, an ordinary car park, was in front of a slope where someone could have had access. And we're now asking for a database of accessible car parking spaces in the Spreydon Heathcote ward that is available to the public. So we'd like to know about that issue as well. But I'd also just like to say that those two resolutions that were endorsed by this council, that were very serious resolutions about disability access and the ability for people to be employed who are disabled, and was endorsed by this council and have disappeared into the morass, never to be seen again, I would like this council to revisit that issue, because we would not allow ourselves to partner, invest in or donate to organisations that discriminated against women or discriminated against people who were not Pākehā. We would not allow it, but we do allow ourselves, the council, to invest in organisations that cannot employ disabled people and cannot provide services to disabled people because they do not comply with 4121. Thank you.
Right, Carleen, perhaps if you could respond to the initial bit.
Thank you, and I appreciate the passion and concerns that you raise. I'm not sure when you say it's got lost in the system what that means, but certainly where we just focus on development proposals, what we can do with Info Council, which is being transitioned in, is we can add these as aspects that need to be completed in our reports. So I'm happy to look at all of those and see how we can do that.
We have no idea where it is in train. It's just, we have a number of resolutions that should be, for instance, in the resolutions tracker, we don't know where they've gone. So we really, if we had ongoing communication about where things were at, that would help.
Just gone.
Okay,
Not even on the resolution tracker.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting is that Info Council is a better way of managing that, so that you will be able to make sure that we include that in our reports, so it won't just be reflected in just development proposals, but more broadly.
Excellent.
Right, Tim.
One of the things with regards to the car parking, and Carolyn, you highlighted it and brought it to our attention, was at the Addington, when they redid the car park there, they didn't make it a priority to repaint the disabled car parks that they had.
They had two,
Yeah.
they deleted one.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for a council in some way, shape or form, rather than have business as usual, to make it a priority to just chase up those resource consents where those organisations in those areas are required to supply an amount of disabled parking, just to police those and ensure that they are numbers are correct and they are up to standard. Carolyn, would you have a comment on that?
We understand that the staff are under a great deal of pressure. The initial idea was that we could have an audit of the disabled car parks citywide. We do understand that staff are under serious pressure. When we did our own audit of the disabled car parks, that was about 9 months ago, and we're still waiting for the report, but we understand why the report is delayed. But we would like enforcement to be checking on car parks in areas where the concrete's gone down again and the car parks are all marked out and one's deleted, just gone. And we would like, eventually, when the city's back on its feet and has a little bit of spare money, for disabled car parks to be a priority and for access to disabled car parks to be listed somewhere so that people could find them.
Yep.
Just thinking with regards to that, one of the teams that goes out throughout our city is the parking enforcement team. And if we had per ward or area or however, a list of those parks, etc., that are required to have disabled car parks, that, I mean, if we're going to travel the city, and that team does, and they do a fantastic job, I mean, if they were able to follow those up and just check on them, and if there was an issue, then they could relay that back to our resource consents, because you are absolutely right, our staff work incredibly hard, but if we've got a team out there, I know it's adding to a job, but perhaps just thinking outside the box.
Yeah, well, the ward boundaries may change too, so I think an area, city-wide description with, sort of areas, identified bit by bit would be extremely helpful. But I think it would be helpful generally to have that information available. I think a lot more of what we're going to be doing is going to be online. And people will have apps on their phones, and they'll be able to identify in the future, not only will they be able to identify where the different parks are, but they will also be able to identify which ones are actually free at the time. I mean, the technology is moving very, very quickly, and Snap, Send, Solve has been one of our most successful sort of online releases to date. So, yeah. Yanni.
Thank you for the work you're doing in this space. I'm just not sure if you're talking about public disability car parks or private disability car parks.
It's probably a combination.
Yeah, it's a combination because there's a requirement to have a disabled car park for up to 50 and then 50 plus 2 car parks, disabled car parks. That's just a requirement. So it's city council, it's local government, it's city council, it's private.
Yeah.
We did an audit of all the disabled car parks in our ward that we could find.
Okay, so just I guess the question for the Chief Executive is, have we talked to Skirt about the works that they're doing? I know in our ward we've had Skirt put in new parking restrictions, and so obviously just having some sensitivity around disability car parks if they're being removed through the repairs, but also in terms of the monitoring and enforcement of resource consents. Is that going to be captured in the Invo Council work, or is that a separate work stream that we need to look at?
So Info Council is really just about our reporting and the information we provide to you.
Right.
So what you're asking for is a piece of work that's separate to that.
Is there any work program looking at, because this is something that comes up around resource consent conditions?
Yeah, no, there's nothing currently programmed specifically around that.
Okay. I just wonder if that's useful if we can get some information back, if that's kind of the gist of the concern, half of the concern.
In relation to existing Skirt work?
Well, no, there's two issues. The Skirt one is around public road space, so where you've got new parking restrictions or going in, just to make sure there's no loss of disability car parks or there's a system of replacing them. But the other issue is the resource consent conditions that require the disability car parking on private developments. There seems to be a gap that there's no monitoring of that. So having a system, and this is something that's been raised around our resource consenting, we've got a lot of conditions and a lot of requirements, but who's actually monitoring them, and how does the community know that those conditions are being met without doing the kind of sleuth detective work themselves? So it would be good to have a better system where we could actually be proactive in that space.
Yeah, so I guess that we need to prioritise that against all the other things that we need to measure as well. But we can look at how that fits in with that.
Paul?
Just wanted to note that in the staff note, which wasn't information that was provided to the board at the time, it would cost about $5,500 for a city-wide database of accessible parks, and
That's not expensive.
which
No,
is,
that was just
which
for
is-
Spreydon
which is-
Heathcote.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, it was for the Spreydon Heathcote ward. Sorry, but that, which is, not particularly expensive, and it would be great if the council would support the development of that.
I don't support a ward wide.
Well, a city-wide one.
It needs to be ward wide, and it needs to be captured. And it may not be something that can be captured instantly, but we should be able to capture all of ours to start with. Yes. And then I would imagine it would be relatively simple to literally count them in the supermarkets, which would be the next obvious one, and then the third group would be the developments that are associated with shops that have parking spaces where they don't actually have a mall or a supermarket. So I don't think it would be very difficult, but it could be just done over time. I mean, we're generally monitoring in those areas. Yeah.
It just seems to me that there's an opportunity for one more ward area to pioneer this whole accessible parking database. And I don't agree with the staff comment that in fact it is business as usual. Clearly, it's not. The standards aren't being met, and the cost is for the ward is $5,500. So I'm just really checking with the chief executive or perhaps with the board. Surely, can we find that money so in fact this database is done?
Well, let's see if we can get the public information first. The information that we hold. If we could identify that. I mean, I find it hard to believe that $5,500 would be an impossible burden or hurdle to cross in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
getting the information
Okay.
together.
I had another question in relation to the Hoonay Library too, and it's to the Chief Executive around, given that in fact the board members had to seek that out, would it be possible for a list of facilities and council land which was no longer needed by council, in this example the Hoonay Library, to be made available to the community boards when those facilities or pieces of land pertain to their area, so that in fact they know, what is coming up?
I'm sure that's fine. What usually happens is that the information is circulated with a question around, are there other things within the council that could be used for before we go out and consult on those.
And that's good, and I'm just wanting to ensure that list goes to the ward managers and the board advisors and the boards too.
Well, the boards should be included, as with many things. We say this a lot early in the process, so we know that there is an intention to go through that disposal process.
One of the issues around the disability access, I remember when I was a member of Parliament, I had a staff member who had a particular disability, and the number of organisations, including organisations that represented people with disabilities, who were on second floors inaccessible by lifts.
That's true.
So you think the council should just stop funding them because they can't get alternative accommodation?
I think we should treat it as any other discrimination. If it was women, if they said no, women are not allowed in this organisation, we wouldn't even have to.
No, but they did make meeting rooms available down, like they moved out. I mean, the fact that their offices aren't accessible,
Oh, Leanne, my idea was that my understanding of this process would have been that policy would have come back to me with a proposal, or come back to the council with a proposal of implementation, and it would have been 5 years' notice. That if you want to be in receipt of donations or partnership with the council, you will be in an accessible building. Yeah. And 5 years' notice. I didn't imagine it was going to be tomorrow. I just thought we should be going along the track that disabled people have the same rights as everyone else.
Yeah, no, I agree, and disabled people don't all fit into one category either.
They don't.
Not all buildings have hearing loops in them, not all of them have, different things. So, but you're saying that the criteria against which we should measure funding, and that's community grants, should be this as well. And that would be, yeah. All right. I think, yeah. I think it does need a bit of work in terms of just getting it absolutely right. I'm quite shocked that you weren't given information about the history of the park before you made a decision. I think that's crazy.
These things fall through the loop. What we'd like is to fix it so there was a box, Right. We're not critical of staff. They're pushed.
I understand.
What we'd like is a box.
I understand that there were, in an effort to make reports shorter, some information has been dropped out. There was assumption that providing the information slowed it down, but what we've learned since, I hear, is that that's actually not what slowed it down at all. Providing the information to members isn't the thing that makes reports take 6 weeks.
No, that's true. All right. So, mover and the seconder, Phil and Tim. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. In terms of the second one, can we change that to accessible car parking data set for Christchurch City? Can we extend it beyond the ward? Because the ward boundaries may change, so I think, yep. So, Tim, Phil?
I just want to ensure that in fact we are able to do that, and it just seemed to me that there was potential for this database to be started in the Spreydon Heathcote ward, building on the interest of people like Carolyn and Helene, and that we shouldn't lose that as a way, perhaps include that concept in the recommendation.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I'd rather start from the information that we have, which is all the publicly available disabled parks. So I'd rather start with that rather than start with a ward and have to build up all of the additional information before you start on the rest. Yeah.
I think because we're in an organisation of records, and whenever you go for a resource consent, anyone that has required a disabled car park through the resource consent process, so we shouldn't only just have that information with regards to public car parks, we should actually pretty well have it right across the board. So I
But
think
that's what
there's a
Leanne
process.
said, that they would build it up,
Yes,
Yeah.
but yeah.
like concrete.
Yeah. Yanni,
I
Pauline,
think it is good
Andrew?
to separate out the two districts between disability parks and public spaces and then in private off-road spaces. And I think, you know, obviously this sounds like something that would be great to get the students from the university to do or something. I am worried that, I mean, the cost will be massive to go through every resource consent and find out where the disability car parks are and then upload that information to some sort of database. So it is quite a big project, but I think there are community mapping exercises that could actually make it more affordable and actually get progress within certain areas. But I mean, yeah, I guess we'll get a report back. This is asking for an investigation about how we can best achieve it.
Yep. Pauline, and then who was that?
Yeah, I just,
Andrew.
We
Paul.
talked about compliance as well, though, didn't we? So this is only using a database of provision and maintenance. Did
Oh
you
yeah,
not-
it's two different issues, yeah. Compliance is another one, yeah.
So would it, is that a separate activity or a separate recommendation, or did you want to build it in?
What, in one respect, we're saying that
This is just the
disabled
database.
car parks in our ward are non-compliant, and we would like that addressed. And we've asked the parking people to address that 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 9
I
months
know,
ago.
but did you want?
But this one is saying, just like Leanne
Give us the
said,
information.
that we should put this on an app so that people in the city know
Yeah.
where they can park.
Yeah. Andrew, then Paul.
Thank you, and yeah, I support this, and I'm particularly happy with the change to make this cover the whole of the City Council territorial area. It might seem pedantic, but just for the sake of certainty, in the resolution, can we drop the word city so that it just says accessible car parking spaces in Christchurch, so that it's clear that it's the whole territorial area, not just the city area?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Pretty hard.
Right,
in this will turn.
Paul.
Just to follow on from what
Wheelchairs
Yanni
go
said,
zooming into the lake.
we engaged the students to actually count all the car parks in Central City in my previous role. They did it in a day. You break it down in grids and you give them maps, and it is actually considerably cheaper than tying up our staff's time to do it.
Geography students would do it. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So, all right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And now it's Phil Clearwater and Tim Scandrett moving and seconding that the report be received. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. That's all good.
Thank you.
Done and dusted. Thank you very much. And now we move on to